Hello, welcome to PodRocket. I'm Kate, the producer of PodRocket. With me today is Johnny Boursiquot. Hi, Johnny. How's it going?
It goes. Happy to be here.
And a lot of our listeners have probably heard Johnny's voice. He is on the Go Time FM podcast. I know I have heard your voice a lot. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
And then Paul, our engineer at LogRocket. Hi, Paul. How's it going?
Good. Happy to be here.
Thanks for joining. So today we want to talk about all things Go. So, Paul, you want to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't we start with how you got into Go, Johnny? Like, why did it pique your interest? Like, there's so many languages out there. Why Go?
That is true. There is no shortage of languages to pick from these days. Go. Let me see. I came into Go when I was doing a lot of Ruby development. I had gotten comfortable and used to sort of the nice expressive way of doing Ruby, and there were a dozen different ways to do any one thing. So like these days, I think that's more of a con than a pro. But I digress. Basically, I had gotten comfortable, right? I think part of it was I was looking for the next challenge professionally. Like I used to sort of pick up generally a new programming language every 1 or 2 years, just to keep myself sort of always learning, that kind of thing. And I had gotten comfortable with Ruby for like three years prior to that, and I was sort of ready for my next language. And then I saw Go, and a friend of mine who also is a very prominent in the Ruby community, or at least was at the time. He's also doing Go now. He said, "Hey, check out Go. You might actually like it." And the first thing that sort of jumped out was like, okay, I'm used to, like, I left the statically typed programming language world prior to jumping into Ruby, and I like my dynamic types. I like being able to sort of work without types and not constraining myself, because sometimes I'm experimenting. I just want I can worry about, right, the type safety concerns.
Absolutely.
And like
it gives you like creative freedom, right? You can kind of jump right into an idea.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and when I saw Go, I was like, okay, this is going to be a change from what I've gotten comfortable with. But the moment I started playing around with it, it felt like it was the first sort of statically typed programming language that I used, like with a compiler that didn't take a long time to compile my code, right? It felt like the feedback cycle, right, from the time I wrote the code to the time I said, okay, go build, right, or go run, the feedback cycle was so quick, right, that I was like, this kind of feels like I'm scripting a little bit, right? This doesn't feel like I, like when I do Java or when I do, C or something like that, where the depending on the size of the program, it might take a while before I get, that feedback. Like this actually can feel like more like scripting, right? So I started, playing around with it. I started building, command line tools with it, something it's very, very good at, by the way. From that point on, I was hooked. Any chance I got to use Go on any project, on any team, like I'd start using it, and sooner or later, other people around me started getting curious. What is this language you're using? I'd sneak it into to companies I worked at and stuff like that, and sooner or later people started picking up on it as well. I'm like, okay, there's something here,
right? Planting seeds.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's been like, this was back in maybe 2013, 2014. So it's been a minute.
That's been a minute.
Yeah.
So do you think Go is good for teams because of its modularity, or like because of how easy it can be to get into if you are in the right mindset? Like, because that's one thing with JavaScript, right? It's like modules everywhere. If you're using Node, it's like really easy. It's like big plugs. So that's why I relate that as a strength for JavaScript for teams. Like, why would you say, where does Go fit in there?
Mm-hmm. So the over the course of my career, which I'm grateful I'm coming up on, or have been like 25 plus years now. I've been on many teams over the years and worked at lots of different companies of different shapes and sizes, and I've gotten to experience, right, what happens when you bring teams up on new technology, or sort of where are the stumbling blocks, where do they struggle, where do they excel, and Go was kind of the first language where the code that a newbie developer, right, and also a developer who's experienced but doing Go for the first time, right? Two different approaches, right? Two different style of sort of design and sort of thinking through code. But even though you had these sort of different experience levels, these different competency levels with the language, I could look at Go code. If I have a newbie developer who's actually writing Go code in an idiomatic way, idiomatic being like, okay, these are the ways we write Go code, right? You can write Go code that doesn't quite look like Go code, and we'll get into that a little later. But right, if I'm following sort of the community idioms, whether I'm an experienced developer who's been writing Go for 5 years or more, or I'm a new developer who's mastered the idioms, right? But I'm still learning. I'm still wrapping my head around everything Go can do for me, right? Sometimes it's almost indistinguishable, right? Whose code you're looking at. But part of that is because Go has been written in a way, Go development is done in such a way that it's the same sort of approach, the same style, it's the same approach. The error handling is done in a very similar way. There's no, I alluded to this earlier. In Ruby, there's like a half a dozen ways to do any one thing. In Go, there are much fewer, right? So when you read that code, whether you're a newbie or you're experienced, you can actually just make sense of it, right? So that was one of the sort of the key things that I saw with teams adopting Go, that everybody got to be productive very, very quickly. I didn't wait for somebody to be experienced for a year or 2 or 3 years before they started producing good Go code, right? I can get somebody, trained up in 3 to 4 months, and then they'll be just as effective as somebody who's been doing it for a year or two.
What would you say, what would you say are some of those like higher reaching things that Go helps bring down for new developers?
One of the sort of the biggest things you run across, especially if you come from sort of a scripting world such as Python and Ruby and whatnot, where dealing with concurrency, you kind of have to jump through hoops to have concurrent Ruby programs or concurrent Python programs. I don't know how much that has changed over the years, and I haven't been in that community for too long. But the trying to scale such programs, right, but through concurrent sort of processes or threads or whatever, fibers, whatever mechanism these different technologies have, it's a much higher barrier to entry, right, than it is in the world of Go. In the world of Go, the concurrency primitives are built into the language. I don't have to have a separate framework. Once you understand some fundamental concepts, it's easier, right, in my opinion, right, to start doing concurrent Go than it is to try and get the same benefits from coming from a dynamic programming language environment, right? Again, there are frameworks that make that process a little easier, that you don't have to fiddle with the bits too much. But when you're writing Go, you're not going through a framework. You're not going through, a black box. You have your Go routines, and you invoke, functions with the Go keyword. You have communication and synchronization that happens between Go routines, with the same set of keywords. Your selects, your channels, and interacting back and forth between those different threads of execution. So the primitives are all part of the language, and they're right there for you to use. So it's once you kind of wrap your head around, if you've never done multi-threaded programming and you start doing it in Go, or if you've done it in other programming languages and you come and start to do it in Go, it's a breath of fresh air. You're like, oh my goodness, it makes it accessible. It makes concurrency accessible, right, to those who are still learning.
A concurrency is usually this big black box of magic that's kind of like everybody puts their toe into, and very few come out, like unscathed.
Unscathed. Yeah. Exactly.
Unless you really know what you're doing.
Yeah.
That sounds very enticing to me. Also coming from like having written very concurrent programs that should not have been in Python. So, that sounds great. That sounds really good. So one other language I'm sure that you've heard about is Rust, right? And these are both system languages. So can you give us the quick like elevator speech on like their differences in your mind?
So I must preface my answer with the notion that even though Go was, I think, way back in the day, was originally presented as a systems language, I'd argue that today is much less the case, right? Yes, you could write low level system software with Go, but if given a choice between doing so in Rust or in Go, I would prefer to write sort of a low level systems, like basically writing an operating system, for example, I would not pick Go to do that with. I would pick Rust, right? Because of the way it deals with the memory and the borrow checker and all those things that it sort of gives you right out of the box to make sure you're writing really safe and secure programs. I would rather use that tool for that job than use Go, right? Where Go shines is in dealing with anything at the network layer and above, right? So anytime you have to have services talk to each other, over TCP, right, exchanging packets and things like that, or anytime you have to write a service that talks to another service, it'd be with gRPC, or you talk in plain HTTP, or you need sort of a long-lived services within your infrastructure that are sort of quick to deploy, quick to build, quick to manage and operate, right, from an SRE standpoint. Really, I think the networked application world is really where Go does brilliantly, right? Things like writing message queues, even some databases are built in Go. Kubernetes, like the poster child for Go, I would say. That is really where it shines, right? That is, so in that sense, the old adage of use the right tool for the job kind of thing in our space, I think is really sort of a shines there, for these two different languages. I think they have the a place for each one of them.
I feel like that's the most satisfying answer I've gotten for that question. It really like helps distinguish them between, like, they're both system languages with different features. That kind of puts them in the same weird box.
Right.
So yeah, we could consider Rust more systemsy and Go network layer and up. Mm-hmm. That's where it shines.
Yep.
So, cool.
Absolutely.
So one thing I think about Rust that I love about Rust is it's a systems language, but when you use it, you could do functional style stuff. You can do these like maps and all that stuff. And I would love to know what you think about function as a service style applications, because I don't know what those are. But when I saw that you were into that, I was thinking, wow, that sounds like functional programming. So am I completely off when I think about that?
The interesting enough, you're not completely off, but depending on the context, right? It's important to sort of pull on the different threads, the nuance a little bit, right? So you can do sort of in the functional programming sense, you can do to some degree, you can do functional programming style, right? Coding with Go, right? Functions are first class citizens. The where you might run into trouble is some tail optimization. Go is not really sort of designed for that style programming, right? It's more along the lines of the imperative style, where it's very C-like. So it's never going to compete with true functional programming languages, right? It's not built and optimized for that, right? Now, if we go much higher up the stack, where we start talking about functions as a service, as you mentioned, that's a completely different sort of world. Even though you're dealing at sort of at the unit level, right, of a function, right, which could be an entry point for triggering a whole bunch of other things, right? When we talk about functions, even though these things are supposed to be small, I've seen very large functions that run as functions in a functions as a service environment. I've seen entire Java applications packaged up, as what's supposed to be like a very small kind of thing. But I digress. But in the sort of the quote unquote serverless world, right, where you have where functions as a service sort of dominates, and that's that's the thing. That's you create those functions and you deploy them and you invoke them when you need them, and when they're not running, they're tucked away somewhere. You don't pay for them to run. When the next time you need to use them, you invoke them, whether it's some event that happens within your infrastructure, or you using some sort of API gateway to trigger those functions to wake up, right? So there's a part of the infrastructure where there's some sort of operational aspects where something is going to grab your code, right, put it in a container, spin up that container, and make sure it's secure, and there's it doesn't have access to what it doesn't have shouldn't have access to, and nothing can peer into it, and kind of these sort of operational concerns. And then it basically controlled then gets handed over to your code, which basically is your function. It's your executable. It's a Go executable, since you're talking about Go. And then basically whatever data is sent into as input, right, gets handed over to your application. It does its thing, sends back a result. That infrastructure takes care of sending that result back to whatever client, right, needs it. And then your function, your code, gets tucked away again, right, gets put away again until the next time it's invoked, right? So that whole world of function as a service and serverless and that kind of thing. And you have those, with every cloud vendor, Azure and, GCP and AWS and all that stuff.
It's kind of like
Yeah.
Lambda, right? That's the thing we're
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, AWS is a name for it, is Lambda, and you have cloud functions and et cetera, et cetera. Yep. So those are slightly different contexts and explanations for the functions argument. Yep.
Gotcha. So why don't we pivot a little bit from strictly talking about Go and talk about what you did at Heroku and your experience at Heroku. So could you tell us like when you started there and the first project you kind of started working on?
Yeah, so I joined Heroku 2 years and I think it's like 9 months or something now. So yeah, I've been there for a little while. And it's been a wild ride. Heroku, as you know, and probably a lot of your audience will know, is loved by all. It's one of those sort of foundational services, right? It's been around for forever. It makes it super easy for developers to just throw something up and quickly, sort of ideate on something and, like get an MVP out the door and build, their business or, like run things for companies. I mean, it tries to encapsulate and sort of make it very easy to sort of just run your software in the cloud with as little ceremony as possible, right? So, which is very different from the trying to roll your own sort of Heroku like thing, like platform as a service, which is the category of a cloud software that Heroku falls into, PaaS. Trying to create your own platform as a service on top of things like a Kubernetes, right? Whereby we might try to replicate the same experience, the developer experience, right, internally at your company or something like that, if you're big enough. Basically trying to replicate that experience, which is what I think a lot of people try to do these days. They try to replicate like a Heroku, like a developer experience on top of their own sort of infrastructure, where they've orchestrated things in Kubernetes, and they're finding that is very, very hard to do. Heroku has had many years to perfect that whole thing, and we are exceedingly good at it, right? So when people try to do the same thing and they find like, okay, this is not as easy as it looks, right? So going into that world where I was a customer of Heroku even before I started working at Heroku was kind of a dream come true. I was like, man, now I get to see, how the sausage is made. Now I get to see, how all these things are put together. And I tell you, it is a magical world of, I mean, today talk about microservices and everything, and that kind of became popular at some point. I don't know if it's popular anymore, or if people have moved on to the next whatever new hotness is, maybe blockchain or something. But Heroku has right a true microservices environment where you have so many components doing a very specific job, and all of them are talking together, right, and exchanging messages and information to make the sort of the magic of using Heroku happen, right? And man, it is truly like something like I've never seen before. It is quite a sort of a wonder, right? Technical wonder to sort of marvel. And my part in it, when I joined as a site reliability engineer, which is it's kind of a way of basically, because SRE is going to kind of you'll find that different companies use the term SRE to mean kind of slightly different things, depending on where they are and sort of the maturity sort of spectrum for their operations. When I joined as an SRE, basically I was going there to solve a very specific set of problems with regards to sort of a adoption of SRE practices, because Heroku basically predates the whole term, right? That whole notion of SRE, like it predates all these things. So, and Heroku's been around for ages. Surely they got SRE right by some other name. Surely they had it right. They got it right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be in business. So my job was to go in and basically say, hey, I'm going to come slap the big blue book from Google and at you and say, hey, this is how we do SRE. We're going to change all the things, right? That was very humbling when I went in there. I'm like, wow, these people know what they're doing, right? My job as an SRE is going to be to identify the areas where we can improve some things, where we can reduce, some latency in this thing because of some operational process that was designed a few years ago, and now some of this have been made, and we need to sort of identify where those friction points are, and grease the wheels a little bit, make this thing a little faster. Or maybe we have some written processes and procedures that have gotten fallen out of date, and maybe whoever was in charge of them, whatever team owned that process or service set of services, maybe they've moved on, maybe they got really allocated, and sometimes people leave companies and things, right? So my job was to basically make sure that the center of excellence, right, that we have at Heroku basically continued to be excellent, right? So basically providing my input where it made sense, and improving things where they made sense, not really to sort of blow the whole thing up and sort of restart over, really to identify areas of improvement. And I learned a ton from that experience, and that actually led to me writing some articles about it, presenting at QCon. I think, was that last year? Man, the pandemic's like throwing my time thing. Yeah. I had I'm super grateful I had the opportunity to talk to a QCon audience, about my experience there, and it's been an incredible journey. These days, I'm doing more observability work. Right now, I'm in a platform observability team, where basically, again, this is a continuation of sort of that SRE sort of journey that I've been on at Heroku, whereby now I'm trying to provide teams, my team and I, right, we're trying to provide teams sort of visibility into every nook and cranny of the platform, right? Identify where the bottlenecks are, identify where there's room for improvement, setting up SLOs for certain things, making sure that we're delivering the best possible experience for our customers. So it's like a continuation, and it is a
Yeah, it
that
never ends.
spectrum is it's there's so much to do every day. It's amazing.
You really must gotta be intimately familiar with how the bones of the system are
Ooh,
put
not
together.
even close. I mean, Heroku is a giant machine of interconnected parts, and if I'm lucky, on any given day, I may interact with one, two, at best three pieces, right, of this giant machine. There are a lot of things that work like clockwork to bring the kind of experience that we bring, and a lot of times, sometimes we don't get it right, and outages still happen, right? Or when AWS is having problems, sometimes sometimes that cascades, and then we have issues too, right? So a lot of times something happened because of sort of the primitives that we run our software, our services on top of. Other times it's internal processes that need to be improved, for us to catch a particular problem that might have that we didn't anticipate, or certain a knob we need to tweak here because there's more sort of a pressure on this service than we anticipated. Now we need to throw more hardware added or something like that, right? So it's basically identifying as the sort of the truck is rolling down the highway, trying to figure out, okay, which tire needs more air pressure, which tire completely blew off. Now we got to replace it. As the truck is rolling down the highway, kind of thing. So it's been it's an amazing journey.
So you really like are having a good time and you're learning a lot. Like,
I am learning a lot. It's every day there's something new to learn, and my team, they tolerate me asking all kinds of silly questions and saying, where do I find this thing? And they're like, very gently, and says, oh yeah, this is the thing you worked on last week that connects to this and this and that. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. So it's been, I'm learning a ton every day.
nice.
So I'm going to talk more about the community stuff. So I actually just listened to a Go Time FM episode. You were talking about how you kind of like where you created a meetup in Baltimore when there was already a meetup, and they kind of merged together. I guess I'm curious, kind of what does that meetup look like, and what do you have planned for the future?
So the meetup story, me and meetups, we have an interesting relationship. I back in Boston, and this was the Boston meetup, by the way, that I started a Go meetup in Boston, and come to find out that there was one. Well, I did my research. I'm like, okay, like I'm looking around. This was, I can't even remember. This is how long ago, but I'm looking around and saying, hey, like I want to meet other people who are also, enthusiasts of Go. Like, where do I go to do that? And I couldn't find any active sort of boards or meetups or anything like that. So I'm like, okay, I found one, but it hadn't had a meeting in like, I don't know, 8 months or something. I'm like, okay, fine. I'm just gonna start one. I started one, and then within about, I don't know, a month or two, I heard from somebody who the organizer of the other meetup that was seemingly dormant, and he's like, "Hey, we had a meetup." I'm like, "Okay, oh, okay, cool." I'm like, "Well, I'm not gonna shut mine down because yours was inactive. So how about we team up?" How about we team up and revive this whole thing and sort of get it going again? And that's what we did. We got together and we created a game plan for what are we going to do, how are we going to have talks and speakers and things. And at the time, there was a small, the Go community was actually quite smaller, relatively speaking, to what it is now, and there weren't a ton of people who could give talks about Go and things. The first conference had even, the first GopherCon, which is the big, our big sort of industry conference, it hadn't even occurred yet. It hadn't even happened yet. So it was still very early days, and basically we were like, okay, well, let's still get enthusiasts together, right, and talk about Go, and that's exactly what we did. And fast forward a few years, I relocated from Boston down to the Washington D.C. metro area, where I currently reside. And my closest metro area is Baltimore, and there was no Go meetup there either, right? I found one. I found some for JavaScript. I found some for Ruby, like all the sort of other languages and stuff in communities I was familiar with. But there was nothing for Go, and I was like, okay, then I guess I'm gonna start one here too. So I did, and it's been wow, what, 5 years? Yeah, it's been 5+ years now. And yeah, we still keep it going. And the pandemic definitely changed our approach to running these meetups. It used to be that in the first years of every month, we had like 10, 12 people at a minimum show up, and we talk about like in the same room together and everything. Gosh, I can't remember the last time we did that. And then yeah, we talk Go, and whenever we didn't have speakers, I'd go up there and say, hey, this is the code I've been working on. Anybody care to ask questions? So I started making it. I started making something like, especially there for new speakers, which is something that's important to me. Like a lot of times, you go to meetups, or you go to conferences, or you attend online events. It's always the same set of people, right? If you spend like 6 months to a year within a technology community, you're always going to find it's the same set of people, right, producing most of the content, right? It's the same faces you see at the podium. It's the same sort of faces you see creating YouTube videos. It's the same group of people, and I'm like,
on
okay.
podcasts, yeah,
And podcasts and things, and as I say that, I'm realizing, okay, I'm one of those same faces, right? You're so I'm like, this is like a problem, right? So I'm like, okay, we need fresh blood, right? How do we get fresh blood, right, into the community? How do we get more voices, right? How do we get a diversity, right, of opinions and approaches and things like that, right? And to me, like, basically creating an opportunity, right, within the meetup context, right, that says, hey, if you'd like to give a talk, I will sit down with you. I will help you come up with a talk. If you have, fear and hesitation and trepidation, and you don't want to go up there, even if it's in front of your 10 closest peers or whatever it is, like, we will get to this together. I will help you, fashion something. And it doesn't have to be long. It can be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, right? And you can work your way up, right, to a conference talk, right? And we were successful at doing with that model, right? We'd have a combination of talks, a beginner oriented and a more advanced sort of a talk, every time we got together and met. And it's been sort of a very rewarding experience, both when I did it in Boston and when I'm doing it now in Baltimore. Obviously, the challenges of the pandemic have made sort of a attendance and these things, which is, as a meetup organizer, you're going to run across these things, right? Some months attendance is high, some it's low. So, but you ride that wave, right? And yeah, leading up to conferences, what the GopherCon I mentioned earlier is sort of the big one. The one we used to have it in Denver. I think recently we just it was online, right? The last 2 years it's been online, obviously, again because of the pandemic. and yeah, helping people, is as a chair, of that conference, finding the speakers, giving people who've never spoken before an opportunity to get in front of a large audience and speak and things. So this ties into sort of my sort of personal mission within the Go community, which has always been to try and open doors for people, right? Try and open doors for those that are new to the language, new to the community, right? Trying to make it a welcoming environment, right? That if you are interested in this technology, that you are going to find people that are helpful and welcoming, right? It's not like going on Stack Overflow and you answer a question, somebody comes in and comes in and slaps you on the wrist. Why did you not read the docs or something like that, right? So basically trying to take a slightly different approach and trying to make it a bit more welcoming of an environment. So which is something that's definitely important to me.
Making it a social engagement is awesome. Like the best way to learn programming is just sitting down with somebody and talking.
Yeah.
I feel like it's very common for learning languages. I know I do. You sit in a chair by yourself and you just read and stuff. But yeah,
Right.
going to a conference, that was awesome. I've never been to a programming conference. I gotta check yours out when it comes by.
Yeah, you got to do it. I mean, that is to me, you can pick up a new technology and sit down and learn it and read the docs or whatever it is and become effective, heck, even become great at it, right? But you're missing out if you're not sort of connecting with other people, because we don't do things in isolate. At least I'd like to think that most of us prefer not to be isolated, right, in one way or another, with the greater community in which we are attached, right, through these technologies. So the I think a lot of times it's sort of the hesitation, that comes from basically maybe you were part of a community before and maybe you raised your hand and somebody slapped your wrist down because you asked a quote unquote stupid question or something like that, or maybe you went to a conference and no, you were kind of in the corner, a little timid, and nobody came in and approached you and said, hey, how you doing? Welcome. I'm Johnny. What's your name? What do you do for a living? Like things like that, right? So to me, like I place an emphasis on that level of detail, right? To me, it's going to a conference or going to a meetup, even if I'm not the organizer or whatever it is going there and trying to spot, okay, who's shy, who's timid, right? Who has taken a huge leap, right? And actually being present and in the room, right? But needs a hand, needs a little bit extra help, right? To more fully ingrain themselves as part of the community, right? Who are those people? Who can I talk to, right? And make feel welcome here, right? So to me, these are the things that matter, because at the end of the day, like I have friends that cross technological boundaries. I have friends from the Ruby world. I have friends, in Java world. I have like I've nurtured and kept those relationships, right? Because it's always been about the people, not about the tech. They over the course of your career, you will do more than JavaScript. You'll do more than Ruby, more than Python, whatever the next hotness is, right? If you happen to be as lucky as I am and have a 25 plus year career, you will use a lot of different technologies, right? But the relationships, right, the people you meet along the way, those relationships you invest in, you got to do it. You got to do it, which is why you got to go to a conference, man. You got to show up and mingle and get to know people. You got to do that stuff.
Especially the Gopher Con, because it's you have a gopher. I love that. I love that branding. Yeah.
Yeah. I go for plushies and all that stuff. You can get one of those. Oh, those are cute. Those are always a hit, especially around kids. My kids love those things.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess one more question before we go. I'm curious. So I know Go has come up when we're coming up with topics for our blog podcast. It seems like that list is getting longer each year. And when we ask our engineers, is this a good topic? Everyone's like, this looks awesome. I need to check it out. Do you feel that with like growing this meetup, this community? Do you feel it getting bigger and more popular, or is that just because I'm kind of on the outside?
Are you saying in terms of the sheer volume of content available now for people to learn, or?
Yeah, just like content and I guess projects specifically.
Well, there's no certainly there is no shortage of projects born every day, right, within this community, and obviously that's a good sign of a thriving community, right? You have more people coming in, more adoption, and lots of different ideas that those of us, who've been doing it for a while, have we're probably busy with our day jobs and things, and a lot of people are coming in with brand new ideas and fresh ideas and implementations, and I'm like, okay, like I see, like, literally, I have a Google alert for the word Golang. So anytime anything Golang shows up, I get an email about it, and I see a lot of blog posts, a lot of articles, a lot of people talking about, hey, Go is great for this, Go is great for that, whatever it is. So I get to see a lot of that stuff come in. Maybe I'm, a sucker of punishment. I'm getting all those emails. I'm going through all those things, but this is my way of keeping a pulse on sort of the thriving, right, community, and how much it's grown over the years. And now that you mention it, one of the things that newbies to the Go community sort of find intimidating is, as you say, the sheer volume, right, of projects and content and learning that they feel like they have to do, right? Because there's just so much out there. Like, 6-7 years ago, I didn't have that problem because there was a handful of reliable sources I could go to learn, right? Other than reading the documentation, reading the spec, or whatever it is, reading the docs, on golang.org, like that was enough, right, to get me going. But these days, you come in and there's like, YouTube channels, there's free code camps, there's this and that. It's just so much stuff, and it's like, okay, where do I start? And I get folks in my Twitter DMs, virtually every week saying, hey, thanks for the podcast. I came across you on the podcast or something like that. Or, oh, you gave a talk at this, and thank you so much, whatever it is. Like I know there's a lot of stuff out there, and I know I shouldn't be coming to you and asking you, where do I start? Because there's so much so many things out there, but it is that very thing that has made it intimidating, right? To get started, right? The getting started is always the hard part, because you don't know where to get started because there's so much stuff out there as a beginner, right? So if you are a beginner, right, and this is me speaking to your audience, if you are a beginner and you do want to get into Go development, I'd say the first place to go is to go to go.dev, right? That's gonna drop you into sort of that's going to give you a starting place, right? That's going to give you a sense of, okay, this is what the language is like. It's going to link you off, to the Go tour. It's going to link you off to some material, like popular bloggers, and I think he even links to some YouTube channels or something like that. But it'll also link you to a ton of books that you can get through. And again, the books can be intimidating. The way I learn, right, anything is a mixture of books, YouTube videos, blog posts, and I'm jumping between all of them, right? I've never started and finished a book completely, right, front to back, and Go in any other tech, right? I'll read the first chapter, try some code, go watch a YouTube video, find another blog post, go to Stack Overflow. Like, I'm bouncing all over the place because any one medium for too long and I get bored, and I need something. I need a different way to consume the material. So if you're in that boat, there's nothing wrong with you. That's just the way we learn, right? We learn it a little differently. So the idea is that you have that as a starting point, right? And then if you really want to start, once you bounce around a little bit, right? Don't try to make sense of it all at first, right? Just get a feel for the different places you can go and learn Go, right? But once you're ready to take a leap now, right? Go to find on the Golang.org website. There's an article called Effective Go. Read that first, okay? And then once you've done reading that, right, you need to start actually writing a little bit of Go code, right? There's another site called gobyexample.org, or is it .com or something like that? But search Google or something like that, or Bing, whatever your favorite search engine is, and Go by example. You're gonna come across that site. It's gonna give you a list, a nice long list, a 2-page list of different concepts of the Go programming language, right? You want to know what doing concurrency in Go looks like? There's a few very short examples that show you that. You want to know how types work? There's a few examples you can try out with that stuff on, right? So you're gonna get a sense to see snippets of code, right? And what does writing these things in Go looks like? And it's very idiomatic. If you learn how to write Go from these sources, you're going to be in a very good position to be able to write Go like Gophers actually do, right? But once you're there, though, nothing cements your learning than actually doing, right? So find maybe it's a small side project you have where you want to build a command line tool for it. Go is exceedingly well suited for building command line tools. Build a small CLI project, right? Nobody has to see it. Yeah, I know sometimes we don't want to show our stuff out into the world. We're afraid somebody's going to stumble on it and criticize us to death, right? That's okay. Nobody has to see it, right? You should build your own, side project. Build yourself a command line tool. Build yourself a little a REST JSON service, right? That runs locally. You can just run localhost 8080 and then hit it. See if you can get some information back, right? And then you're going to start to get a feel for how you write Go code, right? That's the most important thing. Get a feel for how you write Go code, and then from there you're going to say, okay, I need to solve, right, a more complicated version of this particular problem, right? Then when you start searching, then the things that you're landing on are going to make more sense, right? Because you have some exposure, you know what good Go code should look like, right? You have some foundational, right, learning there, right? Now your searches become, okay, very specific. How do I do this very specific thing, right? And a lot of times you're going to end up on Stack Overflow, you're going to end up on some popular blog posts, you might end up on a YouTube video, but you're learning very specific things. If you try to learn too much all at once, you're going to do yourself a disservice, because there's, like you said, there's just so much content out there. You have to basically start from trying to solve a very specific problem. But before that, get that foundational stuff. Read Effective Go, right? And you might come across another resource of mine that I always recommend. Is it's called the Code Review Comments. It's maintained by the Go team. It's under the actual Golang on GitHub, github.com/Golang, right? The wiki, right, has a section there called Code Review Comments. If you want to know how actual the core team, right, on Go, the people who write Go and write the language itself, how they recommend you actually write your Go code, that's also a great source. So once you get that foundational stuff, you're good. The rest is going to be, okay, add a little bit of knowledge to what I know over time, right? Don't try to learn all of it at once, right? Get that foundational stuff first and have a problem you want to solve.
Very cool. Awesome. Yeah, and we'll include all those links in the show notes, so definitely check those out. Yep. Johnny, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on PodRocket. We'll have you. We'd love to have you back at some point, and
sure
we'll see you around.
All right. Awesome. Good to be here.